Hello and welcome back to the ETP workshop. Today's episode is all about how to build a chest part 1. So today I want to run through with you how to utilize this pec fly machine in order for growth. If you're struggling with contracting your chest or you're lacking chest as a whole, then you might be able to use a couple of these tips in order for you to basically big a massive chest. Now, I'm talking from experience here. Chest isn't one of my biggest parts. I've always struggled to build a chest, so I found that using this pec fly machine at the beginning of my workouts to be very, very beneficial. So look, if you can't contract a muscle when you're standing or walking around, you're probably going to struggle to contract that muscle under load. So if you can't squeeze your chest together and put a mind to muscle connection to your chest without any load, you will probably struggle with a specific machine or dumbbells or whatever it is, etc. So to start with, you really want to be able to get that mind to muscle connection. If you can squeeze your chest without any weights and get a good contraction, then happy days, you're halfway there. If you can't, then that's probably due to lack of tissue on your frame. So how do you get tissue on the frame if you haven't got any? Well, you've just got to basically be patient, put rep in after rep after rep, and it does take a long time to build that tissue. So someone that had a extremely flat chest, and I still do now, this is what I used to do in order for me to get a good contraction. So I found that if I went into a dumbbell pressing exercise, a flat dumbbell press or an incline dumbbell press, I wasn't able to feel my chest contracting. So I used to feel a lot of it in my shoulders and my tricep and my lats. So I used to use this machine right at the beginning. So I want to run through with you working in the short range of this motion and loading in the lengthened range. We'll get to that part in a second. But first I wanted to talk about a little bit of anatomy of the chest, just so you guys have a little bit of an understanding of the chest, where the insertion point is and where the pec originates. So there's 3 points to the chest. We have the upper division, we have the mid pec, and we have the lower pec. So the upper pec sits 2/3 of the border of the clavicle. This is the pec's origin, the upper pec's origin. So if you feel along your clavicle, you'll feel from the sternum down the middle, you'll feel across 2/3 roughly, and then you'll find there's a specific spot where there's not really much tissue there. If anything, it will be deltoid, or that's called your 2/3 border of the clavicular upper pec. That's where it originates. Then you have the mid pec, which originates on the sternum, and then you have the lower pec, which originates, well, it's the costal division. So it's called the costal chondral cartilage. The pec attaches to the cartilage itself. Now, where does it insert? Great question. Now, these 3 muscles insert on the humerus. So if you just imagine I was to put a trough on my humerus, can't do it with my skin, but imagine I had a trough, a groove sat down here. If I was to do it with a t-shirt, you'd be able to see it a little bit easier. There'd be like a trough like that, okay? That groove sits on the humerus bone, okay? And that is the insertion point to your pecs. It's actually the insertion point to your lat. Your lat comes up from the back, underneath the armpit, and attaches on the floor of this intravicular groove. It's called the intravicular groove, or it's also known as the lateral lip of the bicipital groove. The long head of the bicep sits through the middle of that. Think about it as a tendon sandwich, right? You've got the lat that comes up and sits on the floor of that groove. Then you have the long head of the bicep tendon that sits over the top of that and runs up into the glenoid. And then you have these 3 pec divisions that run across into the lateral lip of this groove, so on the outside of this groove. So there's a little bit of anatomy for you guys. 3 divisions to the pec: the clavicle, the clavicular portion, the mid portion, which is the sternal, and then you have the lower portion, which is costal division. So now that one's out the way, and you've got a little bit of an understanding how to basically look at the pec instead of a 2D drawing. So When you're using this pec fly machine, it's important to set up a decent height machine. It's important to set up a decent height with the seat and set up your handles. So when you fly, your arms are going to drive across the mid of your pec. You don't want to be up here. If you're up here, you need to bring your seat up. If you're down here, you need to drop the seat so you can bring your arms up. Now with this machine, I've found it's extremely high for me to hold onto these handles. I'd have to have my seat super high. I'd then need to get some plates to put under my feet. It's a bit of a ball ache, so I've got a little bit of a hack here. You can put D handles on your pec handles to create the perfect line of force. So when we're utilizing this machine, okay, back pressed into the pad, feet buried into the ground, a big breath in as I drive forward, and this is going to be my starting point, okay? So I'm going to breathe in as I open up. Imagine you're hugging a barrel, okay? Pause in this stretch position and then drive through into the shortened position. This is where my pec is shortened and this is where my pec is lengthened, okay? Now what's important here, guys, is that we keep the rib cage tucked down. So imagine you're keeping your core nice and tight. We want to keep that rib cage in a neutral position with a neutral spine. If you find that you're rounding forward, that you're just going to have to accumulate a skill or technique in order to maintain a nice tight core, neutral rib cage and a neutral spine as well. Okay, so when we're driving forward, it's so important that we think about driving the biceps together to get the most out of this shortened range as possible. If you are pec flying on the angle and your arms are bent as you're driving forward, you are going to lose a lot of this shortened range. You're not going to contract the chest as much as you would if you lengthened your arms and thought about driving your biceps together. When you do that, you create a harsh contraction, and that is what we want. When you're in the lengthened position, now here's the massive key to take away from this episode, guys. When you are in the lengthened position and you're opening up, when your arms get level to your rib cage, I want you to think about pulling your shoulder blades back. So we're retracting the scapula. When you pull your shoulder blades back, you will actually get even more stretch across the chest. You think insertion point is to the humerus. If we can get that humerus bone right back here with a neutral rib cage, we are going to create a mad amount of stretch from its original point. So we're going to pull this pec right apart here. We want to keep a slight bend in the arm as we open up, okay? We're going to stretch it right back, and then as we drive forward, we're going to think about stretching the arms together. Another key point here is, don't let your head come forward. If you feel that when you're in this stretch position and you push your head forward to get more stretch, you're not actually getting any more stretch. In fact, you're actually eliminating that stretch. Your sternum's here, down the middle, right? When you push your head forward, yeah, you pull your sternum in, okay, and you don't create as much stretch on the pec. So we want to keep as much stretch with a neutral sternum as possible, okay? I'm going to show you how this is done. Again, make sure your setting is on the widest one that's comfortable for you. So when your arms are in this stretch position, the stack isn't going to clang and take away the tension off the muscle. So starting point, okay? Arms, try to get them as straight as possible. You'll probably see I'm shaking a little bit because I've already trained chest, okay? And it's quite heavy. So I'm going to open up, keep a neutral spine, neutral rib cage. Arms are level with the rib cage. I'm going to pull my scapula back, keep everything in line. There's a huge stretch across my chest into my humerus bone. Pause, and then drive forward and squeeze as fucking hard as you can and shorten that pectoral muscle. Pause, drive through, and squeeze. I normally aim for 3 sets on this exercise. The first set will be working a time frame in the shortened range. So I'll normally do a 2 count. When I drive forward, I will contract for at least 2 seconds, or I'll count to 2. 1, 2. First set, I'll micro pause in the stretch because the load is heaviest. It's always going to be harder for me to get from here to here. So I'll spend as much time as I can on the first set as the load is the heaviest in this position. And then when I drop the weight for the second set, I'll spend more time in the stretch and I'll spend less time here because I'm fatigued and it's gonna be harder for me to get here. So set 2 will look like this. Always find this as your starting point. Breathe in as you open up because you're gonna expand the rib cage. You're gonna allow for more stretch across the pec without the rib cage arching up, okay? So breathe in, I'm gonna pause here for 2. 1, 2, then I'm gonna drive. Nice squeeze, lovely control on the eccentric. Pause, 1, 2, drive through. Squeeze the pecs, try and drive the biceps together. Pause, 1, 2, okay? Now the third set, I'm going to just micro pause both ends, half a second, just so I can get a nice contraction, nice slow eccentric, half a second in the stretch position, and then drive through, and that's how I'll finish my set off. Another thing for you guys to take away here, and this is so important, you must train to absolute failure. If you can still contract in the short range, you can keep fucking working. If you can keep getting your hands together here, then keep working. I want you to fail here, okay? Now, another thing, when you're driving forward, don't let your weights touch, okay? You always want to fight gravity. Gravity wants to pull you away. That weight stack is up in the air while you're in the short. You want to be able to have a slight gap and squeeze that together because gravity is gonna pull you away. You want to resist that. That's gonna create even more stimulus to your muscles. So if you want to grow a fucking huge chest, take away these principles in everything that you do. Always train till failure. Never give up on a machine or a rep range where you can finish in the short. If you're doing dumbbells, you're not going to be finishing up here. You might risk it and put a half a rep. If you refer back to episode 1, you know, on that last set, I am not going to be wasting energy on a half rep, but this is an isolation movement. I'm going to be able to utilize every single rep. So on my last single rep, if I'm failing here, I'm gonna keep fucking working. I'm gonna pause in that stretch position. I'm gonna keep trying to squeeze here. I'm gonna keep working till everything I've got. Hopefully you guys have found that interesting and useful. For the guys that have lack of chest tissue, I would try putting this at the beginning of your chest or your push sessions so you can actually get that mind to muscle connection and really think about squeezing the chest. So by the time you finish this and you go onto a pushing movement, whether it's on a machine or dumbbells, your chest will already be fired up and you will already have that feeling. So when you've got the dumbbells up in the air and you're squeezing nice and hard, you should be able to get a better contraction. Let me know if you guys need any further help. Place a comment in the box below and let me know how you guys get on. Appreciate your time. Peace out.